Brand's never going to have that same level of trust, that same level of relevance. It's not right for literally everyone, but it's right for 99.9%. And while they may have very small audiences or relative to millions, they're much better at driving an action because people who are following them are ardent, passionate followers of what those influencers are telling them. And what we see out there is influencers are great at being able to produce high-performing content that typically outperforms branded content through any format or channel, not just social, by 2.5 to 3 times more than typical branded content. Every brand wants to be able to insert themselves into a trend. If you ignore those trends and you don't find a way to participate in those trends, you're losing some share of voice in a way.
All right, Daniel Schotland, welcome to Coffee with Experts.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. Great to be here.
It is good to have you here, man. I'm excited because the weather in Phoenix is similar to that in San Francisco, Bay Area, California. In Linqia, which you're the COO of Linqia, located in the Bay Area, other than the physical climate, what is like the marketing, tech, SaaS, like what is the climate like right now? What's it like to be there?
What's it like to be here? It's like the .com boom of old. And the gold rush from way back in the day. It feels like with AI in particular, just by looking at traffic and congestion, it's exploding. The number of new startups and interest back in kind of Silicon Valley and in San Francisco in particular, predominantly driven by the AI boom, is very real, tangible, and material. And it takes me an extra 30 minutes to get to work. Every day as a result. But there's a lot of energy, which is really nice. COVID hit the Bay Area and San Francisco in particular pretty hard. And it feels like we're finally bouncing back, especially if you listen to our mayor. And there's some truth to it. So,
well, it's good to hear that things are excited. Although we're talking about the traffic on the road, like everybody has a business, they all want more traffic, conversions, but some of these are just vanity metrics. Like as attribution is getting way harder to track. I'm curious, at Linqia, well, before we go into the next question, bring me up to speed on what Linqia is, what you do, who you serve, all of that for the audience.
Yeah, sure. So Linqia is a tech-enabled managed service influencer marketing agency, if you will. So what does that mean? It means that we are specialists in influencer marketing, working with every type of influencer imaginable to produce content, to take that content and export it and leverage it across the entire media mix that any brand might have, from paid social, closest cousin, to organic social, which is where most influencer work happens, to display, online video, connected TV, digital out of home, product landing pages, retail media buys, you name it. But really partnering with influencers and leveraging influencers to drive true business impact on behalf of a brand. So that is what we do. We've developed our own technology, which helps manage and do that, from finding the right set of influencers using deep AI boom, to understand who these influencers are, what affinities they have towards brands, what their interests are, what their audience looks like, the aesthetic of their content, so we can find the right set of influencers or creators for any particular brand or activation, to automating the review and approval process, so like the activation of influencers, which is very painful and generally manual. Our platform helps automate that and make it much more seamless for both our teams as well as the brand and agency partners we work with, which are hands-on keyboard every day, as well as the creators themselves who are in the platform. And then that closed loop analytics, where you were going, which is not just understanding the vanity media metrics, which are important from like an organic social or paid social or paid any type of media activation, the impressions, the clicks, the video views, the engagements, and all that stuff. So really important, but taking it one step or two steps further and really trying to understand that material business impact. What are we driving? What business result are we driving for the brand? Whether it's upper funnel awareness, all the way to downstream conversion, whether that's pixel-based conversion, or it's real ROAS as measured a way a brand would want to measure and benchmark all of their kind of media partners. So typically MTA or MMM is that piece of it. So really closing the loop. That's what we do. And then there's a whole host of other things that we do kind of in and around that, but that's a core of it.
I love that. And obviously there's a lot there, but me hearing that as a 3-year-old in influencer marketing as compared to, you who is a full-on adult, in that if I were a business owner, if I'm not doing influencer marketing, I think there's a lot of lore around it. there's kind of like this bubble around it that's like, it's the next thing. Gary Vaynerchuk is like swearing, as he does, and also cursing and swearing, that like influencer marketing is the next thing, like hyper niche local marketing. If I'm a business owner, let's say for some sort of B2B SaaS, and maybe you can correct me or guide me a little bit. and I'm not doing influencer marketing, like what are some of the things that I'm missing out on?
Yeah. So a few things. I mean, there are multiple facets to influencer marketing, but generally there's two main views. One, influencer as its own content channel or, content creation mechanisms. And what we see out there as influencers are great at being able to produce high performing content that typically outperforms branded content through any format or channel, not just social, by, 2.5 to 3 times more than typical branded content. So
Mhm.
forgetting them having an audience and actually being influential in any type of way, just having them produce content that tends to be more human centric first, tends to be more storytelling kind of first type of approach, not to mention entertaining. There's a lot of entertainment value
Yeah.
in the content that they produce that performs better than typical branded content. So that's one piece of it. The other piece of it really is influencer as a media channel. And so influencers who truly are influential, they built up audiences with authenticity, people who love and follow all of their content because it aligns with them in some way. There's something they're passionate about there. They're able to make an authentic connection between you, the brand, and that audience in a way that fundamentally a brand never can. Brand's never going to have that same level of trust, that same level of relevance, that same level of resonance that
Hmm.
an influencer is going to have with that audience. And so cobbling together a strategy where you're using influencer to make that connection to actually influence based upon the authentic connections that they have with their audience and leveraging that content for you to use to drive real impact in any media or owned and operated that you are developing content for is really the winning strategy. So, as a B2B SaaS owner that isn't doing influencer today, it's not right for literally everyone, but it's
Yeah.
right for 99.9%. It's just what
Okay.
are the right ways in, who are the right influencers to use, what is the right model to achieve, to achieve real impact.
Yeah. 99.9%. I can imagine. I spend a lot of my time on LinkedIn as opposed to Instagram or Facebook prior. And I definitely have seen the rise of the LinkedIn influencer. And I can only,
Oh yeah,
imagine, right? I can only imagine how they're thinking about brand deals and about reaching new audiences. So it's really interesting that there's that twofold aspect that you mentioned. It's almost like, let me ask you, if somebody has a smaller audience, like an influencer
hmm
has a smaller audience, um, are those sorts of influencers like typically better to work with? Like if a brand was saying, "Hey, I could either pay, $10,000 to this bigger one or $10,000 to this smaller one, but they're more engaged." Like, tell me how you view different goals of
totally. So,
businesses.
and I think that's exactly the right way to think about it. So, if you think about kind of influencers and what they can do, think of it kind of as like a pyramid, if you will. So, and a typical, funnel, the top of the pyramid might be more awareness. And as you go further down, you're getting towards actually taking action and purchase conversion, loyalty, all that good stuff. So influencers and the reach that they have align on that pyramid. So at the very
Mm,
top of the pyramid, you have influencers with really large audiences. They are good at driving awareness because they have mass appeal. So a mega celeb or even a macro influencer that might have, millions of people in an audience that's following them, they're really good at driving awareness. People aren't following them necessarily. It's not that they're inauthentic per se, but they're following them because they're so big. They've gained that following. Like the snowball has rolled downhill already for them, and they've gained
yeah.
momentum in that way. And so people follow them as a result. As you head further down the funnel, you have influencers with smaller and smaller reach. The bottom of the funnel you could call kind of nano or micro. And while they may have very small audiences or relative to millions, they are
Hmm.
much better at driving an action because people who are following them are ardent, passionate followers of what those influencers are telling them. And if they talk about a beauty product, if they talk about their morning routine, if they talk about the coffee they drink on the way to work, those people are likely to take notice and go, shit, sorry, apologies for that.
All good.
Little bit of Gary V. Those, right? Like I gotta go check that out. And they're able to drive like real, consideration and actual purchase and conversion much more easily than a large follower at the top of that pyramid.
Yeah. So it comes down to the goal. Maybe if like a brand is launching a new
Comes
product
down to the
line, they're
goal.
launching a new initiative, right? They want that breadth. But if you're going with the legacy products with the the highest margins, then it might make sense to go to a smaller, smaller influencer with a more engaged audience,
Yeah, and
if you
typically
will.
what you'd find is it's a mix. So it's usually never just we're just going to do this or we're just going to do that. And that's
Mm,
where someone who's done this for now eight years at least here at Linqia with influencer, you need an expert who really understands the space and how to get the most out of partnering together and collaborating with creators and influencers. And so it's generally a hybrid approach where depending upon the goal of the campaign, you might want an anchor like macro mega celeb potentially to really drive that massive awareness. But that falls short if you don't back that up with smaller influencers who can take that message, who can amplify it, who can make it relevant in their own way to their audiences to actually drive action. And we work with many, many CMOs like influencer. Feel very fortunate is now at the CMO level where it's strategic. It's 7, 8, 9 figures even of a marketing budget. It's getting very, very large.
mm,
And everyone cares about actual ROI on this stuff, even if the overall goal is, driving awareness around a particular new product.
mhm.
You need to have kind of a hybrid approach, working with different segments of influencers in order to really drive the best impact.
That makes sense. And Linkia works with Fortune 500, Fortune 1000 companies. I mean, you're a leader in this space. Is how does influencer marketing when you're talking with CMOs, at brands, how does it fit into the larger marketing budget or the larger marketing strategy? Is it coupled with, repurposing influencer content for SEO? Is it coupled with, organic and paid? Tell me a little bit more about that.
Yeah, and it's continuing to evolve. This is the fun part about being in the space is if you
Yeah.
asked me that 2 years ago, I'd give you one answer, and it's continuing to change. So now that CMOs are really leaning in, uh, it's about how you can take a more social first approach as a company. And I think if you look at some of the challenger brands that exist today, many of them they are social first brands. Like they've been around for several years, maybe. Liquid Death is
Mm,
a great example of that. Like they are social first, if not social only. Granted,
mhm,
they do TV buys and all that good stuff, but the way they approach and have approached it is social first. Larger legacy brands, the Fortune 500, the Fortune 1000, tend to have not been, and they're trying to cross the chasm. And so, influencer is one of the ways that they're able to do it. So that's one of the reasons it's up there. Two, there's a recognition that if you remove and break down some of the silos that exist between creative and media, PR and social and media, that if you're able to properly align folks to leverage the content that influencers create in an intelligent way, it can drive 80 to 90% of the content you need for any one of those customer touch points that you have, be it again
mm.
your website, be it your product pages on Amazon or whatever it might be it your SEO or any type of advertising that you might be doing.
So you were talking about crossing the bridge or whatever that is, whatever the
Chasm.
phrase is. Yeah, you're
Yeah.
crossing the chasm. There you
Yeah.
go. And it seems to be more difficult for bigger, let's say, household brands to do that because maybe as an audience, as a consumer, we know what you're doing. It's like if you're using an influencer, it's very clear. But it almost seems like smaller brands kind of have the advantage to partner with smaller influencers.
Yeah, I'd say it's less so that they have the advantage. I'd say it's more so um, they haven't they haven't had years of doing things a particular way.
Mm,
They haven't had years of the audience knowing and seeing them through through a particular lens. And so it's easy for them to create themselves afresh because they really are. I think for more established brands, it's like anyone who's going through a rebranding exercise, it can be tough. It doesn't always work out. It's not so easy because there's the reputation you've built, there's the expectation that you've built around who you are and how you show up. And then there's the way in which you operate. And these larger legacy brands tend to be, larger multi-brand entities. And their ways of working just are more complex as a result of that. It's hard for them to be the little Ferrari who's able to, bob and weave through traffic. They're more like the large bus
hmm
or RV. So I think that's where the difference is. But if you change the mindset, it is very possible internally. It's very possible to change the mindset externally as well.
I want to move into influencer marketing or influencers as strategic partners. I was just listening to Diary of a CEO with Kevin Hart, and Kevin was talking about his stages of progression and he used to be kind of like the hired gun, absolute legend in comedy, but now he's forming brand partnerships because he can bring his energy to the brand, and he talked about finishing what he starts. So how, does Linqia facilitate like longer term brand partnerships? Does it always go back through the app, or, how does that work?
Yeah. So because we operate as an agency, we show up as an agency to our brand and agency partners today, an influencer specific agency that is, we kind of sit in between and help guide the process from strategy around what are the goals and how do we craft a program and a strategy across all the different business lines, brands, product launches, cultural moments that you want to show up for, to how do we then bring in the right creators for that and create the right creative concept and execution around it, to how do we then leverage with an eye towards, again, that media budget and media spend across all those other different channels, or you're owned and operated. How do we create the right content and brief influencers appropriately so that content can travel, that content everywhere type of ethos? So we do all of that. And what we're seeing is influencer has gone from a like campaign by campaign based approach where we're going to work with different influencers every single time, to a notion of, well, if you find someone that you can partner with and become a true partner, not just someone to fulfill your content need or to throw something out there on social, then you get a much better result. They get to understand your brand voice. You get to understand their audience. You get the benefit of their insights in helping shape and inform a campaign that you might be creating, help shape and inform a product you might be launching, or a way that you might be trying to message to the market. So it goes both directions.
Mm-hmm.
And so we're starting to see this notion of longer term influencer, more ambassador-ish, or
Mm-hmm.
always on type of relationships. And we help facilitate that and make sure that it's productive for both parties. But it's a great way to show up and get the most out of that influencer partnership and collaboration that you've started.
That's actually where I wanted to take the conversation next, is the future of the creator economy, influencer economy, whatever you want to call it. What are some early trends that you're already seeing about where this sort of segment of marketing is going? That's not quite there yet. I'm thinking of like McDonald's AI, like their Christmas
Yeah.
AI campaign that just came out that like didn't get good reviews, or there was
Yeah.
something in London that came out that just like, wasn't that great. I'm curious what early trends you're seeing.
So many trends. One is trends. So every
Mm,
brand wants to be able to insert themselves into a trend. There's pundits who would say that that's just chasing trends and you shouldn't do it. But at the end of the day, when it comes to social, like the reality is for Gen Z in particular, those trends are what pop on a feed. And as a brand, if you ignore those trends and you don't find a way to participate in those trends, you're losing some share of voice in a way. And so that's one trend is being able to, for a brand to be able to insert themselves with the right creator into a trend in a way that feels natural. So that's certainly one. This notion we just talked a little bit about, kind of longer term relationships with creators in particular, the
mm,
notion of like a post about one thing in time, and then I post about something else, and then something else, and something else, is starting to change too. It's not necessarily episodic content, but it's the notion of a creator having they're building their own brand of content. It's around a particular topic, and that topic is consistent. There might be literal
mm.
episodes 1, 2, and 3 of those posts that they're doing, almost like its own mini series, if you will, or it might just be a higher refined curation of the way that they produce content and the way that they connect with their audience that feels less scattershot and much more directed and intentional. And then brands being able to insert themselves into that. And when you do it, it becomes like a longer term, way of engaging with creators and with that audience than just we're going to create this one thing for a product launch and then we're going to move on and do something else.
Yeah. Yeah.
Those are two, many, many, many others, but those are two really big ones.
Yeah, no, I love that. And the first thing that comes to mind is there's when we're talking about digital PR, because that's what Digital Web Solutions does as one of our main segments of business, it's like kind of what you're talking about, catching the trends and then having a PR response to something that just happened. It's different
Yeah.
from seasonal because that's expected. But I think one of the examples was at the Super Bowl a couple years ago, like the power went out, or I don't know if it was the Super Bowl, but the power went out and everybody was on their phone, and Oreo had an ad that came up that was like, you can still dunk in the dark. And it just had little Oreo with like, a
Yeah.
spotlight on it.
Cultural
Really
moment.
cool.
Like,
So cool. How do you be prepared when cultural moments like that happen as a brand?
yeah. So agility is really, really important.
Yeah.
And this is where it's like, pick your partner. Either you've got to have people on your own team, tend to be more Gen Z in nature, who
Hmm.
live, breathe, social. They get the meme as soon as it comes out. They hear something and they see it because they're so used to understanding what's going to pop on social. There's that moment they're like, now's our opportunity to take advantage of it if we do it, but we've got to do it in the next hour. We can't
Yeah.
take 2 weeks to make that happen. So you got to work with the right partner to do it. Again, someone internal who's great at that and they can execute well. And this is where brands have a very tough time and why you turn to a partner like a Linqia. We've got that Gen Z focus. We've got real tech behind the scenes to be able to identify those moments, ideally before they happen or right as they're happening. And
Hmm.
then we've got the wherewithal to be able to activate, immediately. And brands are the ones that, we've got to kind of bring kicking and screaming along generally to make
Yeah.
that happen. But you got to acknowledge that, we're going to spend X amount of money and we may not have as much control over it. We got to make sure there are safeguards in place, but we have to be okay with that because taking advantage of that moment in time can be priceless if you do it right.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. It can put you on the map like Ocean Spray with the guy on the longboard a couple
The
years
guy
ago.
on the skateboard.
Yeah. Absolutely crazy. I mean, something like that, you just never know. So
Yep.
let's turn our lens inward a little bit at Linkia. You're talking about having someone internal on a staff that's maybe really privy to trends. Maybe they're Gen Z or even younger soon coming into the workforce.
100%. Yeah. It's
What
getting
are
there.
some Yeah, exactly. What are some like guiding principles or values that your team lives by, that they learn during onboarding and that are reinforced as they move forward internally?
So, at Linkia, we try and be intentional about literally everything that we do. And so when we put together our core values, we were very intentional in talking to our team and thinking about as leaders, what's really important to us and what's important to the constituents, both internal and external, that we impact in some way. And we all feel like influencer is a great way to have an impact on the world above and beyond just creating a business. So very intentional in that approach. And so when we hire with the core values in mind. I won't go through all of them, but it's funny. I happen to be sitting in a conference room or a little, phone cubicle that's move fast and learn from it. And so that is one that is really important, especially within influencer and creator. It's changing literally every day. And if you're afraid to move quickly, you're missing opportunity. Doesn't mean you're always going to get it right. You can't
Mm,
get it too wrong, but it doesn't mean you're always going to get it right. And that's okay. And we allow people and enable them to go and to do and to move quickly. And if it doesn't work exactly how we want it to, or if we fail, let's learn from it quickly too and build that into our process and procedure. So we're just getting better and better. And so that's one piece. The other one is create great experiences. Again, we've got a lot of them. Data wins is another one, and be human. That's a human aspect of who we are and what we do,
nice.
and amongst others, but creating great experiences. And so like we sit in between brands, agency partners, and influencers themselves. And when we think about creating great experiences, it's about how do we do that for our brands? Can't be at the expense of the creators. They're an equal and just as important constituent kind of in our ecosystem. It also can't be at the expense of our team.
Hmm.
Influencer marketing is really hard when done at scale. And there are lots of things that can make life difficult. So how do we navigate that in a way, and how do we orient ourselves to ensure we're going to create a great experience in everything we do? We're one of the few places that might actually say no to doing something because we're not going to be able to create the best possible experience, and we don't want to disappoint the partners that we work with. And so that kind of ethos is really important and helps us, I think, in the move fast, learn from it, and understand how to create those great experiences. It helps us do the right thing the very vast majority of the time and get better as we do it.
I like the move fast and learn from it as opposed to move fast and break things, which is I think that was one of Facebook's.
There's another company who has that as one of the
Yeah.
core values, or at least they
Yeah,
did. I don't know.
exactly. I mean, you're taking a little bit, obviously, a lot more responsibility for the outcomes and
Yeah,
recognizing that we can't just leave a trail of bodies in our wake, even
yeah,
though we're
exactly.
pursuing new heights. Yeah.
Yeah, that's exactly
Yeah.
right.
So speaking of like crises, COVID happened a couple years ago. I guess, do you see any crises that could happen in the future in terms of like influencer marketing, whether that's trust, whether that's like, I don't want to say a data breach because that's not really what I'm talking about. I'm talking more about like digital avatars, AI avatars. Like things that can be misused? Like, what's going on there?
Yeah, I mean, certainly the ability for AI to create very realistic video today, the whole deep fake thing, like it's real,
Hmm.
and it is certainly a threat that exists and can lead to distrust on social in particular. So that certainly is possible. Here's the good thing that's built in though within social is when you look at the follower count, you have some sense of how real or not an individual is. And when it comes to influencer, again, people who truly are influential, they've built an audience. It's for a particular reason. The AI accounts, other than being, kind of the AI slop that's out there, yes, there's entertainment value in it. Are they going to drive the business result for a brand? Probably not. Doesn't mean that there couldn't be, whether it's an AI based influencer or it's some of these accounts that are 100% AI based. But at the end of the day, are they going to be truly influential
Mm,
in authentically connecting you with the audience? No,
yeah.
no, they're not. And so I'm less concerned about that. I am more concerned about, as the younger generation, their desire to pursue, kind of entrepreneurial pursuits that tend to align with content creation,
Hmm.
continue to build. Do they end up leveraging AI in ways that short circuit kind of the meaningfulness of the content that they create? I could foresee that being an issue, but like everything, if they're attracting followers based upon it, then
Hmm.
I don't know if that's a bad thing because people like it. And that's the impact that they're still having. And if they don't, well, there's your answer. It's just not working. There's a
Mm,
uniquely human quality I'd like to think that we all have that comes across in interactions we have like this or on social. And AI isn't there yet, from what I can tell.
yeah.
And maybe it will be at some point. But so I'm less concerned in the short term about that being a real crisis.
Yeah, I hear you on that. And I think, yeah, you're right. We still have a long way to go, but it doesn't mean that it's so far in the future that it's unfathomable.
100%.
It's, yeah.
Yeah, you
Yes, it's,
got to be mindful of it.
yeah. Yes, it's a long way to go. But when you look at an exponential curve, like you can go, that's the whole point of exponential curve. I know we're short on time here, Daniel. Where can we find more about you, your initiatives, Linkia, Resonate, all of that?
Yeah, well, check out linkia.com. Linqia, and we are pronounced Linqia, so memorable but slightly different pronunciation than most would expect. So check us out there. We've got a lot of great stuff going on. There's a lot of thought leadership that we put out. We do an annual state of influencer marketing study. We're launching new products all the time. We're very, very close. So a kind of an early, sneak peek at Marco AI, kind of a brand new AI. I don't want to say assistant, really. It's your spiritual advisor who happens to be AI in our platform that can really help inform anything and everything you do related to your influencer marketing efforts and a bunch of other stuff that we have going on. So lots of good stuff. And you can also hit me up just at daniel@linkia.com, or I don't even know what my handle is on LinkedIn, but I'm on there somewhere. Daniel
Yeah,
Schotland.
to my audience, I would advise hitting Daniel up on email because there's not much on your LinkedIn, even though you are influence yourself in a thought leadership at
It's
events and all kinds of stuff.
it's funny. I'm the world's worst social networker. So
Uh huh.
it's funny that I found myself here at an influencer marketing company.
Yeah, I
It's
know,
like
right?
yeah,
How crazy. Well, Daniel Schotland, thank you for being here. And what a fascinating conversation. It's a subset of marketing that I feel like my audience has a lot of curiosity about, but maybe they're apprehensive to take the leap. Maybe they don't know even where to start. So it's great to have a little bit more context and understanding that even though SEO is changing, there are lots of overlaps and there are lots of different ways to bring in new tech without harming their current strategy and their current plan. So thank you for shedding some light.
you got it. All right. Wonderful to be here. Thanks so much, Austin.
Thanks, Daniel.